Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever it is you are in the world, and welcome to another edition of the Living World of Darkness. This evening we find one Frederick Hegenbarth in the S&M club that he has been known to frequent. Having returned to New York from abroad, he finds that his club is still in rather good state. Clientele is just as good as it's ever been, and he's pleased with how things have been turning out, even though he's been brought here on circumstances that are less than ideal. He walks around the club in his normal attire and just watches as people get to know one another. Some engage in some little bit of play here and there, but it's a certain individual that catches his eye. We start our scene with Frederick keying in on a young woman in one of the corner booths.
I'm assuming I start here.
Yeah.
Lady Sheridan would have been sitting with one of her long-standing clients, who is more than a little bit bemused by her sudden upheaval of location, but seeing as he visits New York as well, he decided to invite her along to one of his favourite places to visit while in the city. And not really knowing many people here yet, she decides to go along. She's relaxing while he fetches her a drink. Not that she particularly intends to drink it. And having a look at what's going on around her.
Frederick will make a few steps forward before stepping onto the platform that the private booth is set upon. He'll just put one foot up, leave one foot down, his hands in his pocket of the nice pressed and tailored slacks, and he raises a brow at her. Don't believe I've seen you here before. I've been in this club quite a bit, and I've never seen you here.
I'm new in town.
I see. New in town. Kind of chews on his lip a little bit as he looks her up and down, sizing her up. There doesn't seem to be anything malicious behind his gaze at her. He's just kind of seeing exactly her features and things of that nature, almost admiring to a point, and he gestures towards the seat across from her. Would you mind if I sat down?
Please.
And he'll move and he'll sit down, wondering if his feigned American accent will crack at any moment. But he sits down and he'll wave one of the waitresses over who will come. She seems to come to his call in rather particular, quickly fashion. Messed that one up. But she comes over quickly, and he places just a bill into her apron. She takes the order. She wanders away for a bit as Frederick kind of leans across the table, looking at Sheridan. So, how did you find your way here?
I was invited by a friend. I take it he is a regular. She gestures towards a man that is trying to get attention at the bar and failing.
Ah, yes. One of the stray little lambs that comes in here, somewhat looking a bit doughy-eyed at times.
He certainly enjoys showing his tribute, though.
As Frederick sits there and places, Sheridan might notice that he is very consciously trying to keep his hand or keep his mouth half obscured as he speaks. And that reason might become quite apparent as the waitress comes back with a tray and a glass that has a bit of a golden inlay around it, which doesn't look like the glasses that the other clientele have. And she can probably smell it when it's sat down that it is not red wine, as one might assume at first glance.
Sheridan tends to show very little on her face in response to this. She's certainly seen weirder behaviour than someone preferring to cover their mouth, but the confirmation that he is in fact one of her kind causes her to raise an eyebrow slightly. The barest hint of acknowledgement.
Frederick will lift the glass and just take it to his lips and take a sip in, smiling slightly as he lets the vitae slide down his throat and sets the glass down. So I take it if he is your client then you offer him some sort of service.
Well, the lady has to make a living.
True, that is a weighted response here in New York, as the last few times I've heard it, I've had to ask a few women to leave, unfortunately.
And why might that be?
Well, this establishment has a certain standard to uphold. And, well...
I do hope you're not about to accuse me of being a prostitute.
No. Not at all. If I were going to do that, I would have taken you aside. I wouldn't have sat down and asked you all these lovely questions. But, to be fair, in this city it does happen quite a bit. I'm going to assume that, considering your clientele, and considering you don't appear to be a woman of ill repute, that you are much more specialized in what you do.
Indeed.
Would you care
And I
to
take it you have a few guesses as to what that might be.
Well, we have no problems with independent contractors making their way and making use of this establishment.
I fully intend to outfit my own private area at some point, but unfortunately I had to leave my previous location in quite a hurry.
Local trouble or simply...
Change of management.
Change of management? You're working for a organization?
No, not change of management within the company. Change of management on a much more city-wide basis.
Frederick's going to actually sit a bit more up and a bit more forward. And he pauses for a moment and then just kind of offers her a slight smile. And at that point, the permanent fangs can very plainly be seen. And he'll just kind of tap his fingers on the table, looking at her, trying to gauge her response.
She just simply smirks back. Very little response.
Not very surprised.
I had a pair of those before they came naturally.
Oh. Well then.
They were quite useful in my line of work.
Well, it depends on what your client wants, isn't it?
That is often the case.
Might I be so bold as to ask if I could buy you a drink similar to myself?
I'm not entirely certain it would be to my tastes, but thank you for the offer.
Birds of a feather, then.
I might guess so.
What is your preference? Perhaps we can accommodate. I can't be so bold as to claim that I can cover everyone's preference, but let's see if we can take a shot in the dark.
I believe I'd be quite capable of fulfilling it here.
Well then, and he'll just simply slide his glass across the table to her. Care to try?
She pretends to take a sip, but doesn't actually. She's had far too much experience of blood bonds.
I like her. She seems smart.
Yeah. Considering her sire blood bonded her pretty much as soon as she was embraced, she's not going to take the risk.
Very well. Siggy, or Frederick, rather, will just simply lean forward.
And she makes a small face of distaste, but doesn't quite specify. Returning the glass.
He'll take it to him, back to himself, and just take a small sip. Well, then, you remember clearly of the scepter. That's good to know. It's been quite a while since I've seen one of this lovely clan. And he smirks within the confines of these four walls.
Our family does tend to believe itself above this.
Well, my dear friend in the city, the one who brought me here, he doesn't quite care for my tastes here. He seems to think that I'm running some sort of brothel or some sort of BDSM shop of horrors. And he just gestures around at the establishment, which, pardon me, which for its part is actually rather classy. There doesn't seem to be any obscene acts going on in the middle of it. There is a main stage, but it is currently empty. Everything seems to be very much on the level, but it does look like it has a certain exclusivity to it.
Well, some people believe that they can learn all there is to learn about dominance in a boardroom.
Frederick is just going to smile at this point and lean back, and there's a look in his eyes of acceptance. He seems to almost nod at her as he relaxes his demeanor and becomes a bit less quizzical, and just pulls the glass back into his hand and takes a sip. So, you're going to be staying in this city for some time?
I very much hope to. It does rather depend on the first impression I make with certain people.
Well, if you wish, I can arrange a meeting with the Seneschal.
I would appreciate it.
Silas will be happy to hear that there is, well, others of our ilk here. Unfortunately, the clan has suffered in the recent nights.
I'm sorry to hear it.
Yes, unfortunately, we've done with murderous turncoats as of late. It seems to be going around. It's not just the scepter that seems to be having this problem. The Rose has also had several of their own. Namely, two Primogen almost back to back.
In my previous location, it was those of the more mystical persuasion that were responsible for some of our troubles.
The Tremere.
They weren't aware of it at the time.
Well, and Frederick kind of just pinches the bridge of his nose and just kind of nods with a smile on his face. The Tremere here, up until recently, had also been somewhat problematic. Unfortunately, one of them had problems with keeping their chantries from being invaded by others. Which reminds me, and he sits up, do you know the layout of the city as far as the others are concerned?
Not yet. I myself have only arrived a few days ago, and having had to travel so quickly, was not able to make the introductions ahead of time that I would have preferred.
Well then, I should let you know that the New York Central Park is only a place you would want to go if you wish to commit suicide. Lupines are very entrenched there, and they're fiercely territorial.
How very terrible.
They are indeed, but we found that as long as we don't encroach on their holdings, they don't seem to have a problem coexisting, at least. They ignore us, we ignore them.
We had a similar arrangement.
I think it's getting to the point in this world where all of the others seem to believe themselves, or have found, rather, that, well, all-out wars are inadvisable, especially in an urban setting like this.
Well, I suppose it wouldn't do anyone any good to break the mask.
Indeed, they likely have their own version of it. It's probably one of the reasons they haven't been outed on the news or in other various outlets.
For the most part. Though I doubt that we haven't done something to help them at some point. And quite likely the reverse.
I'm not one to say. My sire told me very early on that if I were to see one or hear about one, that it'd be a good idea to make a hasty exit, and I'd like to think that it's kept me alive.
Most certainly. But if you were to hear of humans finding one, you would surely try and prevent them from doing so.
Indeed. Oh, there's also the Bronx. I wouldn't go there. There are creatures there that are, or at least they claim to be, of an infernal nature. Referring to themselves
Perhaps
as,
I should move to another city.
oh, the Fallen. I wouldn't worry too much about them. They also like to keep to themselves.
Well, that makes a change.
I've been lucky that they've had relatively peaceful dealings with our previous prince, Prince Piruzun. And as long as we keep out of their territory, they stay out of ours.
I'm not entirely sure that I would want to go to such an area anyway.
I hear that the Bronx Zoo and the Botanical Gardens are something to behold and should be on every tourist's list. However, I'm pretty sure they do meet in the daytime. And beyond the Bronx, there is the New York University in the Chelsea district.
Another
These-
Tremere holding?
No, these are, I believe the term is mage, spell weavers. Humans that seem to be able to control a very similar form of, I dare call it magic, but all the same. They seem to be able to do what they do, and they are very happy to not interfere with our dealings with the mortal side as long as we don't encroach on their territory.
A common theme.
Yes, the only thing we really worry about in this city is the Sabbat. They
Which are certainly
recently,
a problem everywhere.
indeed they are, and they are making a push into this city. Staten Island, I believe, is where they call their home.
Hmm.
They're still masquerading under the guise of being anarchists.
Anarchs you can deal with. Sabat you cannot.
It depends on the city, I've found. Sometimes they have little else to go to. They have no place to call home, and if they can find a quiet little corner of a city that the prince or archon don't find desirable, I've heard of instances of the tower and the sword existing in relative peace.
I'm not so certain.
Well, I doubt this will be the case in this city. They've been very deliberate in their attacks, and I do believe we've lost several Primogen outside of Clan Toreador and Clan Ventrue to them.
I shall have to be quite careful then.
Well, you are in good company, and if you need a domain to call your own, at least until you can establish one, you're welcome to stay with myself and the other Ventrue of the city.
That is very generous. I currently have rented a place for a few weeks while I establish myself, but it is very kind of you.
He'll pull out from his coat pocket a little business card. It's a black bit of card printed on a rather nice bit of paper. And it's simply in a sort of red print a phone number. And he just slides it over to her. If for some reason that you find yourself in trouble, don't hesitate. We can't afford any more losses on our front.
She takes the card and returns one of her own, which is slightly more fancy, but along similar lines. It has her name at the top, followed by a phone number and an email address. But
Okay.
is also black with red, slightly metallic lettering. And probably much more flamboyant font.
Frederick will kind of stare at the card for a minute and lower his head. Seems that I have been outclassed this evening.
Not at all. I doubt that it would suit you.
You don't know much about me, Lady Sheridan.
I meant only that curls are often considered more feminine.
He'll simply take the card and place it into his coat pocket, and then lean across the table. Exactly what makes you think that I am always of a masculine persuasion?
I never presume, but you are currently more masculine in guise. Perhaps it would suit you on another occasion.
Indeed, indeed. We all do have so many personas that we sometimes partake in.
Well, those of us that are interesting enough to manage them, and not mad enough to confuse them.
Hmm. I'll have to introduce you to some of the Malkavians of the city and have you say that to them.
Why on earth would I say such a thing in their presence?
It might be entertaining.
Perhaps, but hardly useful.
True. Well, Lady Sheridan, I'm afraid that I was only able to stop by for a moment here this evening, and I've already tarried longer than I should have, but I have to say that it was quite enchanting meeting you all the same.
I look forward to seeing you again.
And
In
with,
which other persona?
hmm, I might have to show you exactly my own odd predilections, what they are. And he walks over to her side of the table and just holds out a hand to take hers for just a moment.
And she extends hers, not as if to shake a hand, but clearly intending for him to take it in a more gentlemanly fashion, as he's probably presuming to offer.
Indeed he does. He simply hurts one arm behind the back and bows at the hip and kisses the top of her hand very gently and looks up at her as he raises up and offers her a kind wink and a smile. Until then,
Oh,
please enjoy yourself here.
I already have been.
He simply takes a few steps back, nods, lowers his head one more time before walking off into the crowd. And I do believe there we can end our scene.